Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this month's Azure Security Meetup. A big thank you to all those who are tuned in. I can see a couple of people in chat already, which is great. This month, I've called in a favour. I'm very, very happy to have a good friend and colleague of mine through Paul Maggs to talk all things Defender for Cloud Apps and what it can do for your organisation to protect your organisation's data. This session's a little bit more adventurous than usual. We're focusing obviously a little bit on the M365 side, but still quite valuable to those who are operating in Azure. But I won't talk too much about that. I'll let Paul take it away and introduce himself. Thanks, mate.
Thank you very much, James. And we're all here this evening because you're concerned about protecting your organisation's data. And I thought it'd be really helpful if we could spend the next, approximately hour or so learning how Defender for Cloud Apps can assist us in that space. So protecting data using Defender for Cloud Apps. My name is Paul Maggs. I am a consultant. I work at Rinco. I specialise in the cybersecurity and modern workplace security and compliance space. And I'll be your host for this evening. So protecting your organisation's data isn't easy. There's shadow IT, there's data sharing internally, externally. There could be data exfiltration that is going unnoticed. And how do you really know this is occurring if you don't have the right tools? And in recent years, cloud services and the use of those has exploded. Everyone is using them to get work done during the day. Anyone can buy a cloud service. Doesn't matter if you're an organization, you could be just a person. If you've got a credit card, you go out and buy a cloud service and you can start consuming it. So when you think about anyone can buy a cloud service, that means anyone in your organization, they could purchase a cloud service they want to use. It could be a department. They might be looking at a way that they like to work that suits them well, and it may not necessarily work well for your organization in terms of looking at the risk that involves. How people access data in recent years has changed considerably as we're using and consuming cloud services. Those are remote to us in the cloud, which means we're working remotely, we're able to work from anywhere, we can work pretty much from any device. So that's a lot of variables about where people are working from and what they're accessing those cloud services from. Technology has enabled us to collaborate in better ways, so we can share files much easier with people internally, but also those partners that we're working with externally. So this brings us to a sobering statistic that Microsoft has produced, that when IT admins ask how many cloud services that they think their employees use on average, they're thinking around 30 or 40. But in reality, that average is over 1,000 separate apps being used. Whenever I, deploy Defender for Cloud Apps and we start getting discovery reports, we see thousands of cloud apps that are being used by employees. Not all of these are going to be something that you need to be too concerned about, but it's still something that you want to have a look at. And if I was to ask you, could you be able to accurately estimate how many cloud services your employees are using? And once you've actually got that estimate, would you be able to then tell us which ones would pose a risk? And you may be able to do that just based off by having a look at them. But, there's plenty of other things that we can do to kind of dive into what people are doing with their cloud apps and how they're sharing their data and working to kind of then understand the risk and see if it's really something that we want to have occurring in our environment. So the agenda for this session is I want to step through and give you an overview about what is Defender for Cloud Apps and some of the capabilities that it can do. We're really going to concentrate on the data aspect. So it does go out quite wide in terms of the things it can do, but let's kind of consider that we're going to be looking at how it works with data. We'll look at how it does continuous discovery to see what's going on in your environment, such as Office 365, or it could be a third-party cloud service. And we can continually gather stats about what's occurring. And once we gather those stats, we can jump in to identify, investigate, and remediate risks. And we can create policies to action the data that we've been discovering, to raise alerts so that we're aware of what's occurring. We could automate some of the governance actions that could be, that we could apply after these alerts have been raised as well. And also, finally, we're going to go through a session policy demo where we can show how we can use Defender for Cloud apps to monitor sessions, whether Office 365 or third-party cloud. We can monitor what's going on in real time. We can determine whether the actions people are doing are going to be allowed. Now, at a very high level, what is Defender for Cloud apps? Well, it's a cloud access security broker. It sits between the cloud services that they're using and the end users who are using those services. It then also collects logs from these services. So whilst we can monitor what people are doing, it's also getting logs from these services as well, so we can get activities about what they're up to as well. And it monitors their behaviours. It allows us to do cloud discovery. So I alluded to it earlier, we do continuous discovery. If we have Defender for Endpoint, for example, and we have it integrated with Defender for Cloud apps, we can start getting a lot of event information about the cloud services people are accessing and what they're doing there. We can also get a lot of log information from proxies and firewalls. If you use Zscaler, for example, we can also integrate Zscaler and collect a lot of information for our discovery. It has integrations, as I said, with Defender for Endpoint, but it also integrates with Defender for Identity. So we can get alerts based off activities that are occurring with our on-premises Active Directory, which might correlate to some other activities that we'd want to investigate around what's occurring with our data. If something's gone, if an account has been compromised with Active Directory, that can also impact our cloud apps. Integrates with information protection as well. So if you're using information protection to classify and label your data, we can then report on what's occurring with these types of files. For example, I might label documents as confidential, and I might want to see where they are located within the environment. I also might want to apply policies to these documents based on the actions people are doing. Also works as the reverse proxy. So if I'm using an endpoint such as Windows 10, for example, if I'm logging into Office 365, I can get good. I can start, monitoring those sessions. But also, if I've got an enterprise app in my organisation with a third-party cloud service that I'm using that is integrated with single sign-on, it might be a financial app, for example. I could integrate it into Defender for Cloud Apps, so then I can also monitor those sessions. And of course, we have the controls, which is all around, based around the policies and the alerts that we can set up. Before we progress too far, just want to touch on the licensing options. This isn't a comprehensive licensing overview, but it is a very high level. And if we look at this table on the very left-hand side, we can see the features that we can enable. And then along the top, we get bit of a descriptive name of the different type of license and that we can actually start using. But if we look on the left-hand side, and depending on what our requirements are, we can, with an Azure ADP one, we can just enable cloud discovery. And what they've done, Microsoft have done, is they've got a catalog of over 25,000 cloud apps, and they actually give you risk scores for these applications, and that helps us to do our discovery and identify the risk of these applications. But if we've got an Office 365 E5 license, we can do a cut down version of the discovery, but we can do some more integrations around the information protection and conditional access app control. But if we want to have the full range of the product unlocked, of course, it's the M365 E5, which gives us all the capabilities from discovery, integrations with information protection and threat detection. We're able to route third-party apps through the session proxy, and we get some cloud platform security for Azure, AWS, and GCP as well. Okay, so talking about how it all works, the first topic is let's have a look at and have a bit of a discussion around continuous discovery. And the way I look at it is, without the discovery of what's going on in your environment, you're not going to be able to identify risks. How do you know what cloud apps are in use? Well, with the discovery, and as I mentioned earlier, if we've got it integrated with Defender for Endpoint, for example, we can start getting good discovery information. If someone's going to Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, or they're going to Box, Dropbox, Concur, all these other services, we can start discovering this information. And with this information that we're discovering, we can find out what are the apps in the organization which are really popular. Which of these apps are showing the most data transfer, whether it's downloading from those services, or more importantly, it could be what data is being uploaded into these services, because that could mean data exfiltration. And once we understand, what apps are out there, and we've looked at how much data is being transferred, that can help us to make further decisions, such as what is the risk of this cloud app? Do we want people to still be able to use it? And when we do have a look in the console, I'll highlight how we can actually look at the risk of a particular cloud app. And when we do look at the risk, it bases it off security, compliance, and legal scores. So does it use single sign-on? Does it meet certain government regulations? We can kind of look at those statistics for a cloud app, and we can make decisions from there. And of course, once we've done the discovery, we understand where our data is going, we're thinking about the risk, we can then look at what do we really want to do. And a key term that you'll hear with Defender for Cloud Apps is app sanctioning. And app sanctioning is, I can actually mark an app and say it's sanctioned for use, which means we're happy with it. And for reporting purposes, we can report on our sanctioned apps how much data is moving around. But if there are applications we're not too happy with, we don't want people using, we can mark them as unsanctioned. And once we do that, that cloud app service is they can no longer connect to it. And I just want to highlight, though, that when we're doing sanctioning, unsanctioning, we do want to have something such as Defender for Endpoint integrated or Zscaler, so that we can actually control the behavior of our end users as they're connecting to these services. Of course, with this continuous discovery as well, because of the Azure AD integration, we can also hook it up and connect it to our third-party cloud services as well, and we can then monitor those sessions too. So the thing with continuous discovery, we get a lot of event information about what people are doing when they're connecting to cloud services, and this continuous discovery keeps us really informed about what we want to do when we're looking at identifying, investigating, and remediating the risks in our environment. So that continuous discovery, that's helping to help us form what we want to do next. But what really does happen post-discovery, we've got all of this data that we can review, but now what? Well, we can create policies for detecting, alerting, and to perform governance actions. And what Defender for Cloud Apps does have quite a lot of inbuilt policies that some are already enabled that can assist you for identifying what people are doing. But there's also got various templates as well, which you can start with to start creating policies. And what that means is we can start creating policies that can detect end user behavior. They might be doing a mass download of a lot of files and we want to alert on that. It might do detection of sharing activities that they have as well. So they might be sharing a confidential file using a public link which anyone external to your organization could access. Or they might be connecting to risky applications, what Defender for Cloud Apps has deemed as risky, and they might be uploading a lot of data to it. So we can start triggering alerts based off those sorts of information that we're gathering. And of course, once we've got all of that data, we can then conduct in-depth investigation. So once we've got all this data, we can trigger alerts, but there's some really good areas within Defender for Cloud Apps where we can conduct in-depth investigations that go beyond the alerts. And we're going to be having a look at this as well. And so we can start reviewing all of the activities that have occurred that we've logged. And for example, it might just be logging information such as person A has signed into Exchange Online. They've downloaded a file. They've shared a file. We can get a lot of activity information. We can also do that based off files and user accounts as well. But once we've done those investigations, we might also then decide that we want to start routing some of these sessions through our Defender for Cloud apps proxy so we can get better monitoring out of it. And of course, when we're doing the investigation and remediation and those kind of tasks, there's some really good reporting that I want to highlight from Defender for Cloud apps where we can get some good reporting, especially around the all of the files within our tenant. We can then have a look at how many of these have been shared and the type of sharing, and then we can deep dive on those as well. And the reason I find that really important is in the past, it's been difficult to know what files have been shared and who has access to them. And, from my experience, when I've been looking at some of these reports, I've seen people who have shared out folders on their OneDrive, or it could be in SharePoint, and it's got tens of thousands of files in it, and they are accessible to anyone external who has the sharing link. So it's good to finally be able to get that sort of information. And of course, we can perform actions on all of that data if we're discovering those sorts of sharing activities. But those who are inclined, all the shadow activity, shadow IT discovery, if you're someone who likes to do your hunting in the security center using KQL, you also have those sorts of capabilities as well. And with that, we're going to head across to Defender for Cloud Apps itself and start looking at it and get a bit more of a deep dive overview. Okay. Oops, just do that with me as I get myself sorted. Excellent. Okay, so this is the console, and so if you haven't seen it, I'll give you an overview of it, and then we'll start doing a bit more of a deep dive. But when we do come in here, we do get a dashboard overview. On the left-hand side, we have menu, and it kind of fits with what I've kind of stepped through just on some of that slide deck there as well. We've got our discovery, which is our continuous kind of discovery of all of our cloud apps, which can include Shadow IT. We've got our control, where we have our policies and templates. So once we've collected all of this data, we can come into the control here and we can create policies and use templates for that, which will then surface as alerts. And of course, if we really want to do deep dive, we've got the investigate over here where we can investigate activities that have occurred from all of the cloud services that we have connected up in here. And as I said earlier, if someone logs on, someone downloads a file, someone shares a file, there is a ton of information. If you need to find information or something to alert on, I'm sure it's in the activity log. You just got to drill down to find it. We can also do our investigations based off files and user accounts. But let's start with the dashboard when we first come into the console here. And it helps us to quickly identify important information that we have already collected. And in here, it's really simple for me to see that I've got 37 alerts open, and I could, if I wanted to, click on view all alerts and then go for a deep dive and then start reviewing those. Over here as well, now this is a dev tenant, so if I was collecting a lot of data, it would be telling me here that I've got new apps that are potentially discovered. So any new cloud apps that haven't been discovered in the environment in the past 30 days, and they're new, they will surface in here. So I get a quick overview of what people are connecting to. It might be someone has just bought themselves a subscription to Box or Dropbox, and that will then show up in here and we can start deep diving into there. The other one that I really want to highlight too is users to investigate. And this is a pretty interesting one to look at. So the way that this works, so we've got all of our continuous discovery about all of the cloud apps that people are using. We're getting a lot of information from the cloud services as well and what's going on in those environments. But it's also looking at the end users themselves. And so there's a user investigation score. And when people are just performing even their everyday activities, this investigation score can start to rise. And so, for example, if I go to a SharePoint site that I've never visited, it will actually just add a small increment to that investigation score. If I download a file, if I share a file, it will start to automatically increment. If I trigger a policy, which could be based off someone sharing a confidential file that I don't want them to share, that will then also add to that investigation score. And the more and more people do these sorts of activities, the more that investigation score will increase. And we will have a bit of a look at that investigation score just a little bit later in a bit more depth and detail. But it is giving us a good overall indication of, at a glance, who are those people that potentially we may need to investigate further. But let's jump over here into the Discover section. So this is all about looking at shadow IT and the cloud services that people are using. And of course, a big component of this is all of our data, all of our files that we want to make sure that they stay within the organization. We can start getting a good overview right here, what is going on. Just to give you, when we do come in here, this is a bit more of a dashboard within the discovery section. But it's quite simple to navigate, and the way that it works is it breaks it up, and we can get a whole bunch of app categories that we may want to investigate based off, for example, collaboration, cloud storage, online meetings. It'll even give us information about the apps that it's discovered, so the individual apps, risk levels. So we will dive into it a bit more when it's looking at the cloud apps. It will give it a risk level, and we can then start breaking down, okay, how much traffic have we got going to medium risk? It could be high risk, and they might be, categories that you want to investigate, and who are the top entities as well. The other thing too is when I look along the top and we've got the menu along here, we've got discovered apps, IP addresses, users, devices. It's really about how you want to slice and dice and get to the information that you need. I might want to start with discovered apps and look at an application, investigate it. I might be wanting to, investigate a user or device or IP address. It can get you all the same information, but it just depends what your starting point really is. So let's have a look here. When we're looking at the discovered apps, so these are the apps, and with my current configuration, it's coming from Defender for Endpoint from the last 30 days of my test account. It's giving me information about all the cloud apps that have been used in the last 30 days. It gives me the app name. I get a risk score, and this is out of 10. I can see the traffic, how much is being uploaded, how many users, IP addresses, and devices, and so forth. From here, what might be interesting, you might want to sort it by upload, because then you can see which one of our cloud services, has the most data leaving the organization. And if I look here, for example, I can see Dropbox is the main contender. Interesting, considering we've got SharePoint and other services here. But once we have a look here, we can even drill in further on the cloud app itself. So we've done all this discovery. Now we can, start doing a bit more of a deep dive to see about what's really going on in this space. Now, for example, when I've clicked on Dropbox, I get kind of a bit of an overview of what's going on with this cloud app. We can see there's only one user here. So, if this was a live environment, we'd be seeing potentially a lot more data come in. But here we've got one person who has uploaded, or they've had 115 megabytes of traffic, and we can start just get the overview statistics. Now, when I click on info here, this is where I was talking about the risk score itself. So the risk score for Dropbox is 9. Now, depending on the apps that people are using and depending on what they might be using them for, this could be important. So I can look at security, compliance, and legal. We might have a requirement here that we will only use cloud services that have a trusted certificate. Someone might be using something and they're unaware that that is an important thing to have. We could then unsanction this app so they can no longer use it, or they can no longer go to these sorts of sites. There might be a compliance requirement that we have as well. We might have an ISO 27001. We're happy if they've got that. Yep, they can use that. It might be HIPAA as well. So there's all of these kind of security, governance, and legal considerations that build that risk score. However, don't think of the risk score if it's low, meaning that the cloud app itself is not very good. It just may not meet some of the requirements for the intended use that people are using it for. We can deep dive even further, and we can have a look at, get some statistics about what's going on here in the the form of graphs about the users, number of users that are using it, and we get like this. This is over the last 30 days. I've only got one person who's used it on one particular day to do something, but we get the users. We can understand what their total traffic is. What are the IP sources that they're using? So how many IPs are out there? We can deep dive and look at the IP addresses as well, because that might highlight that something is not looking too good in our environment, the downloads and uploads, and we get the top ranking in here as well, so we can get some really quick stats straight away. You can dive a bit further, look at those users themselves, you can check the IP addresses. That's one of my virtual machines. I know it's my IP arranged, so I'm happy with that. But like I said, you might find IP addresses there that you might think that is not good to see. What devices they're using as well. And also, if there's any alerts that have been triggered for this cloud app. And in here, for example, I've created a policy that says if there is a new popular app where X amount of people access it and X amount of data is uploaded to that cloud service, it will then give me an alert. So then I can start to understand what people, what new cloud services people are starting to use. Because as I said earlier, there's, the average organization has thousands of cloud apps that are potentially being in use. It's really going to be hard to track and monitor which new ones are being onboarded. But because of this discovery, we do get to have the capability to say, new cloud app, and we can trigger a policy based on, a bunch of criteria. In this example, it was just based off, I think it was one person because it's my dev environment, and they'd uploaded, 50 meg of data to it in a day. So here, this gives us a really good overview in the dashboard. Get this right in the discovery. So this is all around that shadow IT discovery and how we can build really good reports from that. Now, once we have all of this data, we can generate some really interesting reports as well about the cloud usage. And I'll just look in here. And this is a report that's just generated from Defender for Cloud Apps. So it's really simple to do. It's an executive report. And, at a high level, it just gives us a good glance about what's going on in this environment. We've got 457 users, how much data is, how much traffic there has been, how much upload there has been. But, when we look further, it'll give us statistics. And in a more live environment, we'll get some really good key findings that might be something that we want to action about the type of apps that people are using. It'll also give us recommendations and then start to graph out different findings that it has, such as, the risk level by traffic. Most of the traffic here has been in low risk cloud apps. So that's pretty good. And it's only high risk apps is showing only at 1 megabyte there. So that's pretty good. And we can just continually go through this report, something to review. And this report then may help us to make future decisions about, what kind of policies we may want to implement to control our data usage. The other area is, so we've gone through that kind of continuous discovery. Let's have a look at the policies themselves. So policies, as I was saying, there's policies that are built in, and some of these are already enabled. But there's a whole bunch of templates as well that we can use to start building our policies. You can also create policies from scratch, and they can go really in depth based off, user activities. And when I show you some of the activities that you can search on, you can see just how deep it will go. In this environment, I'm only just doing alerting based off Office 365, but we can also, if we've got integrations with some of our third-party clouds, we can start adding those into the policies as well, AWS, GCP, and of course, the monitoring policies via the proxy sessions if we've got enterprise apps that are integrated as well. Just so you know as well, Defender for Identity, the on-prem AD monitoring tool, that also surfaces alerts in here. So that can you can start associating those alerts with other activities that are based around your cloud apps as well. So the apps, the policies that they do have in here are based off, they kind of categorize them into threat detection, which would be like your Defender for Identity, information protection, where we could create our policies based on data sharing or what people are doing with those files, Conditional access, where we're looking at things such as routing our sessions and doing things such as if someone is connecting from an unmanaged endpoint, I'm going to block you from doing a copy and paste, or I'm going to restrict your downloads based off the data that's in that document, and we detect on real time, or I might encrypt it in real time on download. And shadow IT. Let's have a little bit of a look at one of these policies. So I'm just going to have a look at the information protection. I think this is probably suits the kind of mood of what we're talking about this evening. Publicly shared confidential files. So I've got a policy that I created for publicly shared confidential files. If a file is labeled as confidential with information protection, and it's shared, I want to create an alert. I've got 3 policy matches in here. So if I click on this, just a really quick overview of policies. The policies and the contents of how you can structure them are based on the policy type. So conditional access is going to be different to threat protection, to information protection in regards to what we can select in here. But just to give you a good overview, when we're looking at this policy, for example, I'm searching for sensitivity labels. And as you can see, it's really easy to start building policies in here just by selecting and doing drop-down boxes. And for this example, I'm looking at sensitivity labels from Microsoft Information Protection. I want to find anything with these labels that are getting shared externally as public, which is searchable, or the other public where anyone has the link, or external. So I can alert on those. I've got an alert, it's just going to surface in the console here. If I wanted, I could send it as an email. It could be an SMS. You can integrate this with Microsoft Sentinel as well, and they will talk to each other. So when you're actioning alerts, they will understand that it's been actioned in one place or the other. But if you're doing it in Defender for Cloud Apps, you can also then initiate governance actions or other tasks that you want to do via playbooks using Power Automate. But the other interesting thing, which is quick and simple to do, is they also have governance actions. Now, these governance actions may also change based off the type of policy that you want to deploy. But for example, here we might have a policy that is going out to discover a sensitive file that's been shared, and it's already been out there, it's been allowed, but we want to then do a governance action. In this case, I could mark it private in here, and once this alert fires, it's just going to mark it private, so only the owner has access. We might want to send a digest to a file owner or notify some specific users as well. So there's different governance actions for some policies that are already built in, which makes it quite simple if you don't want to step out to Power Automate, or if it's integrated with Microsoft Sentinel and using other kind of ways of doing that. But looking at the policy itself, that's how we kind of construct them. They're quite simple to make. Let's have a look at some of the policy matches, because I want to really show you that once we've done the discovery, once we've fired a policy, an alert, what do we really get out of it? What's kind of some of those benefits? Well, the publicly shared confidential files that I've created. And by the way, when we're looking at a lot of this interface, it's very similar across most screens in terms of how we can filter our policies with the drop downs, or there's also advanced filters, so we can start building those manually as well. But here, for example, we've got the publicly shared confidential files. We've got 3 hits. Now, what's really interesting is it's telling me what the file names are. I can see who the owner is. It's been shared from OneDrive for Business. I can see the collaborators. That's of interest. We know it's hit a policy because it's in this screen. And we also have additional actions up here that I'll get to. But the first thing I want to look at here is we can expand it out. We can get bits and pieces of information in here about the file. We understand that it's a document, that it's got a sensitivity label applied, hence why it triggered the policy. But what I do find of interest here is I can look at the collaborators and click on this. Now, understanding where your data is shared is pretty hard without the right tools. But here, once it's been triggered, I can then do a bit of an investigation. Say sharing links. Okay. So this is a confidential file that has been shared to me at my Rinko address. And I might be okay with that, and that's fine, because this is a sharing link that just goes out to one person. That person has to have that email address to actually open that file. But if I look at something like product marketing, oh, this is a different one. we can see here that we've got a file that's been shared with a public link. Now, the problem with this, having a public link when you're doing sharing of a confidential file, is anyone with that link now has access to that file. So that could be a problem, and that might be something that you want to action. You might want to, perform some sort of task to remove that share. So we know that that one doesn't look too good for a confidential file. This one's got 19 collaborators, which makes you think, wow, I'm a little bit concerned about this one. But when we look at it, there's a lot of information where it's been shared, internally to internal staff. And, based on, the circumstance of this sharing and this file, we might be fine with that. We've also got this sharing link. This one, once again, it's been shared to my external address, but only I can access that. It's not a link that if I shared with other people, they will be able to get to. Now, once we actually have this list of files that we've identified that match the description of confidential, shared, we can then perform, if we could automate some of these actions, but let's just say we're not going to automate it. We can actually then come in here and have a look at the actions, and I could look at some related alerts, activities around that file. I could also apply a sensitivity label, a different one if I wanted to. I could inherit the parent permissions, which should remove the sharing. I can also make it private in this instance. So once I do that, only Adele Vance would have access to that file. So we can do these sorts of actions, and it may change based on how it's been shared. This one's been shared a little bit differently, so I can remove external users or just remove a single collaborator from it. So, sometimes those actions will change a little bit. But this is just looking at it from the policy screen and then seeing what the policy matches are. We can go even deeper in terms of what we can see, and I want to do it with this file here. Let's go view related alerts. And we've now gone from the policy section where we've had a look at, a couple of sharing activities that have been triggered, and we're now in the alert section. It's just filtered for that particular file itself. So this is what the alert would look like. You can see here it's automatically filtered it for me for this particular file ID. Let's go in here. We're now going to get a lot more information about what's going on in here. And whilst the other one kind of concentrated just in the file, we're going to get a lot more activities. But looking from top down, when we look at the alert itself, we can see that, what policy it triggered, where it was stored, who shared it, and what the document name is. Over here, we see the investigation score. Now, when I was talking about risky users and they've got an investigation score that increases based off the activities they're doing, this is the type of activity that you can see it's done a plus 40. So here's that investigation score. If it was 100, it's now going to go to 140. If this triggered for 10 other files, that's going to go up an extra 400 on top of that. So this is how we can start, based off the activities and the policies, we can start to get these alert scores, investigation scores rising, and that'll help us to know who we do want to investigate. For those who just stepping back, the other things that we do get here as well, just up the top, is once again, we've got the resolution options based on the file like we saw on the other screen. But here, Alex Wilder, we get a few more options based around him when we can go and investigate him a little bit further. We could also do other options such as, suspend his account, require him to sign in again. So, depending on what's going on, we might feel that this doesn't look like a typical behaviour that Alex might do. We might get him to sign in again, or we might confirm him as compromised. Those who are that inclined, it also gives us the MITRE tactics to know where we are in the kill chain. It's giving us a list of all the files, very similar to what we just looked at before when we were looking at the policies and the matches, but this is where it gets really interesting. So we've got activities related to the match file. So now we know that there's been a policy that has been triggered based off a sharing activity of a confidential file. Now we're getting a little bit more context about what's going on in this space. And we can see from the bottom up here in the activities relating to the match file that it's auto-filtered for us, we can actually see that Alex Wilbur has created a link. this has been shared, and it was shared with my external account, and I have accessed that file. So now we can start seeing that once we've shared it, we can see, have I actually accessed that file? What's going on with it? And yes, it's been shared with me, and I have accessed that file. And these activities that are coming up here, that it's filtered in relation to this alert, they're all contained in the investigation activity log, and there's a lot of activities that you can investigate if you need be. So that's what those alerts look like, and that's how you can see what's going on with your data, and then get an investigation from the alerts. But we might want to step further. So we've done our discovery, we're getting a lot of information about end user activities. We're also getting it from their endpoints, from the cloud services as well. We've got policies to detect what's going on and certain activities that we may not really be too keen on people doing and we want to be alerted on. And now we've looked at the alerts, but now we get to do the investigate as well. And so over here, this is where it gets a lot more interesting as well. So this is where we can broaden our investigation. We can go deeper than what we saw in the alerts, because now we've got everything in here that we might want to scope and start creating, certain filters so we can really target particular activities. So we can find out what activities were performed. That's what the activity log does for us. We've also got files, which tells us information about the files. And it's a bit like the cloud discovery, where I might want to start my investigation from the cloud app. It might be from a device, a user IP. The same can occur in here in the investigate. I might start with an activity. I might start with a file. I might start with a user account. Really depends on where you want to start. And there's going to be a different starting point depending on the information that you have on hand. So here, let's start with the activity log. And I just want to show you here, we do have advanced filters, and we can really create a lot of different types of filters based off the activities that we need to filter out. But I'm going to start with a query, just start nice and simple. We can have a look at all of the sharing activities that have occurred within the environment. And this is going to be across everyone. And we look here, you can see here some of the activities that we saw earlier down the bottom. Alex has created something, it's been shared with me. We also get some other interesting information where it's got this suspicious activity. Why has it done that? With Defender for Cloud Apps, when you first hook it up and it's doing its initial discovery in the first couple of weeks, it starts getting baselines about people's typical behaviours. And well, in here, we hadn't had much activity occur once I connected it up, but Alex Wilbur shared a file. It was the first time he shared a file with someone external. So it's kind of said, oh, this looks a little bit different for Alex. So while it says suspicious here, it doesn't mean it is something that is bad, but it is just saying this is, not usual behavior that we've typically seen. So this is telling us all about the files that have been shared. If we want to look at other ways that we can slice and dice here as well, we can look at folder and file activities as well. So you can see here all of the files people have accessed, download, and you're going to notice here that there's a lot of downloads for the admin account. If I keep scrolling through here, he's been doing a lot of downloading. Now, if this was could be an admin, or if it was another account, this might raise some eyebrows about, well, what's going on in this event. Someone is downloading a lot of files. It may mean you need to do a bit of an investigation to find out. It might be someone who's on their notice period, for example, and all of a sudden we're getting a lot of activities. Well, we can start triggering policies in here and start getting some really good deep dives into that information. The other kind of query here that is interesting, did I have folder and file activities? I think I did. When we're creating these policies as well, and you can see here when I'm looking at these queries, it's auto building the filters that we've got here, and you can build these yourself. But you can see here there's a lot of activities around folder and file activities that have been ticked, and it includes all of the sub activities as well. So you can see there's a lot of stuff you can search on. Just for example, if I typed in, for some reason I had a policy that I wanted to put in looking for something to do with the password, you can just start typing in here and start searching. The amount of user activities and activity types that you can find in here is quite phenomenal. So it's something that you'd need to, if there's a particular problem you want to look into, it might be worthwhile coming in here and typing away to find out if it's going to give you the activity type. Because once we've got these activity types, I can create a new policy from that search, and that becomes a policy which then I can alert on. So we could really scope and filter, what we're looking for from the activity logs we have today, and we can build those into policies as well. Also, the other area that I find quite handy is the files section. You'll notice here too, so this is all the files in the environment. And, when someone creates a file, it gets added into here. It's very similar to what we've seen in earlier previous kind of when we've done some investigations, get information about a spreadsheet. There's no sensitivity label here, for example. But what I do like is we can see that a couple of these have triggered policies, and they're actually triggering the policy alert that we saw earlier. So we can, we could look just from here and start finding out what's been triggering policies as well. But there's a few things in here that I really do like. It's a built-in query. It's stale shared files. I don't have anything shared for that's been longer than 180 days, but I can start now reporting on what are the files that people are sharing externally, and they're considered stale. For example, no one has accessed this file, no one has modified this file, and so I might be looking at a policy that says all files that have been shared or files of a particular type, if they haven't been accessed within 180 days, create a policy, go and remove all the external collaborators, and it's no longer publicly available. And if people need to access it, it's been 180 days, they can request access to that file again. So it's a kind of good way where you can actually go out and search for the files that are in your environment, which no one's accessing. They're still shared, but you may want to clean that up. The other things that are nice in here as well, kind of looking at reports, is, for example, access level. I can look at all of the files that have been shared externally. Some strange ones that have been shared externally here, but we'll just disregard those ones. But here are the 3 files, once again, that triggered that alert that I showed earlier. So we can see here what ones have been shared externally. And we could then surface that down to, has anyone shared files which are searchable on the internet? And of course we get none, so we're very happy with that. There are some here with the public links. How many people have shared files that have a public link that anyone with that link can access? We have 2. Might not be too happy with that. And I'll put the external in here. And we can continue building on these filters as well. And one that I like here is, I might look at sensitivity labels as well. So we want to look at, let's do a search here and find out all of the files that we've got that, have been shared externally. They've got Microsoft Information Protection. I want to find something, Project Falcon. It's a very confidential project. You should not be sharing any files externally. And of course, yes, there are other ways with DLP and other things that we could stop this sharing. But let's just say it's been shared. I can actually see here that there is a highly confidential project that's been labeled Project Falcon that is now available externally. Well, let's have a look here and say, is it, going to a specific person? Whoops, nope, it's not. It's either public or publicly searchable. So now we know we can actually kind of dive a little bit further around different types of files and different types of scenarios, and then start having a look in here. And once again, we can start building policies from these searches as well. And if we look here, Project Falcon, public link, we don't like that. Once again, we could do something about it here whilst we're actioning the file if we want to do a governance action, or we could turn that into a policy to go and do that automatically for us if we wanted to. The other thing that I want to show, and unfortunately it doesn't show up in my tenant, but I do have a slide for this. In files, we can get a really good overview of all of the files that we have in, for example, OneDrive and SharePoint. And let me just share my presentation deck again. This is one that I really, really like. Making sure it's showing up.
We've lost your video, but that's all right, mate.
No, that's all right. I'm just going to a slide here. if you've got the slide, that's the most important part. But there's data management reports, and I don't know why it's not working in my development tenant at the point in time, but it's really, really handy because we can start looking at the cloud apps that we've got connected. In my tenant here, I've got OneDrive for Business and SharePoint Online. But we can start getting an overview of all of the shared files, all the files that we have, all of those that are shared, but also get a good number of the sharing permissions that are signed. For example, these might be shared as just internally shared between employees, but we can also get the statistics about how many do we have publicly shared. And I have seen in the past when I've put these reports and had a look at these reports that you can get hundreds and thousands of files in your tenant which are showing as publicly shared. And the beauty of this data management report as well is you can actually then start to kind of deep dive a bit further as well. So you can just keep clicking on the link of all of the numbers in those reports, and you can start having a look to see what those files are. But you can get kind of like reports as well. Who are the people that have shared the most files as well? And they might have shared something on OneDrive. They might have done that a year ago. They don't even realize it's shared because it's really difficult it's tough enough for admins to know what's been shared in their environment. It's even more difficult for end users. They just don't have the capacity to know where to look to find that sort of information and then remove those shares. So the data sharing reports and the data management reports are something that I think are really handy, and something that, if you've got Defender for Cloud Apps and you've got it in, have a good look at it, and you may then want to make decisions based off the information that you've got in there. Okay. With that, we're going to have a look. Shouldn't be too much longer now, but we're going to do a bit of a demonstration. So we've done the console overview, but I want to show you what Defender for Cloud Apps looks like when it's used as a session proxy. And the scenario that we want to consider here is someone is signing into a PC which is not managed by the organization, so we have no control over it, but we still want to allow someone to access our systems. We still want them to be able to access the data and do things with it, but we want to monitor that and we want to control what they can do. So with that, I will share this. So this here is a Windows 11 machine. This is Adele. She signed into Office 365, and she's using a machine that's not corporate managed, not corporate owned. And so she still wants to get her work done. She still wants to be able to access the data, and we still want to allow her to do that. And we want to be able to do that from anywhere, but we want to kind of restrict what she can do. So she signs into Office 365. Now, when we do this, there is a conditional access in Azure AD that will redirect and goes, she's on an unmanaged endpoint, rerouted to Defender for Cloud Apps. And then there's a policy there that will say, oh, yes, this is Adele. We've got to manage her session. And so her session is now routing through the Defender for Cloud Apps. At the moment, it doesn't look like it is, but once I do click on something such as Outlook, we can see here, and this is optional, this screen, by the way, that she's now being monitored. So we're routing it through the session proxy, and we can actually then look at what she's doing and perform actions in real time based on what she's doing. This text is also customizable as well. So in this example, for example, I've got 3 policies that I have deployed. One is if you are on an unmanaged endpoint, you can still log in, but I'm going to block you from doing copy, cut, and print. And so from a web browser on any endpoint, I can come in here. If I do a cut and paste, we get told the action is blocked. So she's unable to, copy and paste outside of these sessions themselves, which is, she can still get in here. She could still compose a message. No problem doing that. The only kind of limitation that you do get in this space is if she opens up another window, which is Microsoft Teams, you still can't copy and paste between browser windows. And that's just going to be because of the browsers themselves. But as you can see, we can still give someone the ability to sign in, access and do their work, but they can't take that data with them. I've also got another policy that I've put in place as a different example, and let's go to OneDrive for Business. Once again, this is going to be monitored. And let's open a document once this loads. So Contoso purchasing data, let's open this. So we can open this document. Now, by the way, we would also have other policies which would block the desktop applications so that they can't use those because they're coming from this these unmanaged endpoints. They should only be able to use the web proxy itself. But in this instance, I do have those applications installed just for some of these demo purposes, but we would typically block those. Now, this is a document that has credit cards in it. Once again, can't copy and paste, so we've blocked that. And the other thing that we've done here is based off, and this is doing real-time content inspection based off those credit card details. Let's see if she can download this document. There we go. So based off the content in that document, we can also block her ability to download that document onto this unmanaged endpoint. We get the error message coming up, and we also get a text file that we can use for anything if we have to talk to the service desk or something along those lines. But she can't download it. However, if I went to something such as inventory, you'll notice here, inventory, I can download that file. So we've done the real-time content inspection, and we've said, okay, based off the credit cards, you're not going to download that file. This inventory doesn't have information that we're overly too concerned about, but we will block it. Actually, that Contoso, that one that's blocking is, I can't remember exactly what the policy setting I had on that. I think it's, sorry, the Contoso purchasing data, it's blocking the download based off the sensitivity label that I have enabled in here, which is highly confidential, and it's Project Falcon once again. So based off the sensitivity label. Now I've got a different example that I want to show you based on credit cards, and we've got a document with credit cards in it. We can open it up, have a look in here, see my example credit cards, and cool, we've got credit cards in there. There's a certain amount in there. Let's see what happens when she tries to download something that has credit cards in it. So we go to the download. It's allowed me to open this. Now I'm going to open this in the desktop app. Typically, you can't do that because we would be blocking those activities as a requirement of the session control policies. But we've got credit card numbers and we've allowed her to download it, but we've done that real-time content inspection once again, but we've made a different decision. Instead of blocking it for her, you'll notice here, we've got the protected view. We'll just do enable editing, why not? But view permissions. So there might be an instance where we're not blocking cut and paste. We might not, but we want to kind of control what happens when data is downloaded onto these sorts of devices. Could be a managed device as well. But this document, she could edit in the tenant. But when we look at the permissions, I have now restricted this download to Adele's sign-in only, and she only has view access. There's nothing else that she can do in this document itself. Can't copy, can't print, can't do anything with it to modify it. So there's the ability if you want. So if someone downloads a document, you could have it so it just encrypts it and gives them the rights to access it, no one else. If she sent that file to someone else or someone stole it, good luck to them attempting to access that file. And so that is kind of like a high level look at, once we've got policies that have been enabled in terms of routing it through the session proxy itself, how we can monitor, and then we can do real-time actions based off the data or the actions that they're performing. So for example, the cut and paste, we can block actions based on that, or if there's particular data, or if it's labeled in a particular way with a sensitivity label, of course, we could then apply that based off those sorts of criterias. And that's pretty much it. The overview of Defender for Cloud Apps in terms of stepping through from all of that continuous discovery, getting all the discovery, looking at how we do the policies, how we can generate alerts, how we can perform investigations, and how it can also be used as a session proxy as one of the policy types, because there's plenty of more type of policies that we can do, but how we can then monitor those sessions based on what people are doing.
A big thank you, Paul. That was a really insightful session. I'm going to put us back to the normal MC mode, but Teams just seems to be playing up and we've lost your video. That's all right.
That's probably good.
Yeah, we've got the grey screen, Paul Mags. It's
Hold on, I was presenting, so maybe that's All right, I'm the grey screen.
Yeah, all good. I found that session really enjoyable. I haven't spent enough time with it. MD Defender for Cloud Apps or MCAS or whatever it's called next week or tomorrow. I suppose for organizations kind of getting started, right? You touched on at the start, you have a lot of cloud apps and Microsoft gives their opinion on them. Is there like any way that people can kind of I suppose what would you recommend as criteria for organizations to judge themselves? Like say they're starting from a blank slate and they haven't got compliance, is that the place to start? Look at what they want to comply with, or
Yeah, it is. So whilst we look through, controlling sessions and policies and those sorts of things, the first thing that I would do is, get that cloud discovery up and running. And I think the best way to do it is Defender for Endpoint, or it might be a Zscaler integration, one of those sorts of solutions, and collect that information from those endpoints and let it run for several weeks. And then, as I highlighted, there's that executive report. Have a look at that executive report, and that'll kind of start giving you, some of those graphs and data that could be a really good first step that you want to look at. And it does also give you some recommendations as well. But I think also that once you've done that discovery, the other thing is you're going to have to make it based on each organization is going to be different, right? So they're going to look at, why is someone using Dropbox? That's not a part of and why is there a heavy usage? So it's going to be very independent on the organization. So it's going to be very different, but start with that discovery and then start making decisions from there.
right? Okay. And I suppose in terms of like licensing, obviously it's best if you have an E5. How do you think that organisations go with adopting? Like, is there a step up kind of approach you can take where you implement features under a lower license tier and then step into some of the more advanced capabilities?
Yeah, you could. I mean, also when we were talking, like those first steps is going to be that discovery, right? I think it's Azure AD P1 that'll give you that discovery. And you could start with that discovery and see what kind of value you are getting, because that is the first step you want to do. And that might then inform your decision. What do you want to do next? Do we extend it out a bit further so we can put in a bit more information protection or something around threat detection, which is Office 365 E5, but it does reduce your discovery. But if you've already got the Azure AD P1 plus the Office 365, you could get quite a lot of features out of it.
Yeah, licensing is a bit of a quagmire for a lot of people, right? So
it is. It requires a degree, a licensing degree.
Very true. Very true. I don't think we've got any questions in chat. We actually do have quite a shy bunch tonight. But for those of you who are still tuned in, thank you for spending some of your Thursday night with us. We've already put in our next event for May 26th. That will be the talented Jess Dodson up from Queensland telling us all about what's new in Sentinel, because it's a product these days that has a new feature every third day, so it can be a bit like drinking from a fire hose. She's going to tell us everything that's new, but she's going to do it fun. So it's not just going to be reading a product update sheet, I promise. We are trying our best to figure out what in-person looks like again, and I'm currently in talks with some people at Microsoft to actually get that in person again in June. So if you're in Melbourne and you're still keen to catch up for a beer, please stay tuned. As always, thank you for coming along and have a lovely night, everyone.